So, last time we had done a few small things, but we'll quickly run through them. What we did last time. Narad has finished answering the puzzle which Savitri's mother was facing about this riddle of this world. Why in God's world there is suffering, there is pain, there is grief, there is sorrow. Why there is death? And she even questions whether it was Narad's God who had created this miserable suffering world. She was kind of blunt also in that respect. And then Narad sets himself out to answer in detail every aspect of what she was asking, the questions which she had raised, every aspect of it. And as I said, we can kind of divide his long answer. He must have been talking almost for 2 hours in reply to what Savitri's mother had said. She first point which he was making is that pain is a hammer of God. Pain is a hammer of God by which God shapes man, sculpts man with that hammer. And then he extends this argument by saying that even when God comes down here as an avatar, he takes upon himself the entire burden of this creation. He accepts pain, he accepts misery, he accepts death, he accepts suffering. Without that, the world cannot be saved unless he participates in it. And the example which he gives is the example of the crucifixion of Christ, how he carried the cross on his shoulders and suffered to redeem the fate of man. Then he says that the task of the world redeemer is to some extent different than the avatar. World redeemer comes here in the context of the difficulties of this creation. Avatar comes here to extend the scope of evolutionary growth from one stage to the other. So when he comes here as a world redeemer, he comes in the context of the difficulties of this creation. Then he cautions very forcefully that, well, this is the condition, and man should not take the path of the title. He should not force the issue in this creation here. He should prepare himself gradually and allow things to happen. Don't take the titan's path. That is what he says. And then finally, he answers to the queen by saying that, after all, it was her choice to have come to this world. Don't complain. You had made a choice. At one time, at one point, you were very happy up there in the transcendent, blissful and all that. But you became curious of this creation and then you have plunged into this. It was your choice, it was your free will by which you have accepted this. And then, of course, the justification is given that you have done it for a purpose. It is by that process it can be taken forward. The soul became curious of the shadow cast by truth in the darkness here. Shadow, it saw the shadow, became curious, and then it came here. So don't complain about that. It is a process, and you have accepted carry on. So, therefore, you have to suffer. You can't help it. It is a mechanism by which things will grow, will expand. The future, the bright future will arrive. It is for that purpose you have come here and you are carrying on your work. So it is in that context then Ashwapati asks a very pertinent question. If the spirit, if the soul has plunged into this creation here, does it mean that the soul, the spirit, is ruled by the outward world? It's a very blunt question he's asking, Ashwapati. Of course, he knows the answer, but he's raising that issue to clarify certain aspects of it, you see. Is then the spirit ruled by an outward world? That is what he's asking first, you see. And then, if it is ruled by the outward world, is there a remedy within? Can a solution be found? But he is now focusing the entire point, discussion, towards his daughter's fate, because that is the matter of concern for him, towards his daughter's fate. And he hoped, he thought that it was the Divine Mother herself who had taken the mortal birth here. Is she going to suffer like this? That was the question he is asking now. But what, well, before that, he is defining in this sentence, what is fate if not the spirit's will fulfilled by cosmic force? That is the definition according to Ashwapati, that after all, fate is nothing but the spirit's will fulfilled by cosmic force. That is the definition of fate. Spirit has accepted the cosmic working. It is going through the cosmic functionings, cosmic aspects, and it is coming here with its own will. So it is that will which is really working through the cosmic force. It is that will which is working through the cosmic force. And therefore he says, I thought that a mighty power had come along with Savitri. Where is that power now, if she is going to suffer? I deemed a mighty power had come with her. Is not that power the high compeer of fate? Is it not accompanying her, that power, that Shakti? Is she not accompanying Savitri? Now, this is a question in a way, but I will rather read it as a rhetorical question. Is not that power the high compeer of fate in the context of Savitri? Is not that power the high compeer of... Yes, it is. That power is the compeer of her fate. The answer, the rhetorical question means the answer is yes there. Answer is yes there, you see. But it is Narad who has to say yes. He has put a rhetorical question and it is Narad who has to say yes. Why he has to say yes? Ashwapati knows it. And he is kind of insisting that Narad says yes. He is insisting upon that. He should say yes. Because when he says yes, in that yes, the entire occult power of his spirit is put. And it is that occult power then which will start working in the life of Savitri. His yes is important. Will it happen? Yes. The moment you say yes, then the whole thing descends. The example which I had given you was last time when when the mother met Shevandu for the first time on 29th March 1914. She saw the supramental world and she asked him, will it come down? And Shrivandu said, yes. And immediately she started seeing the supramental world descending down. Again, here also, the point is, it is not that she sees the supramental world. She also knows that it will come down. Still, she is asking Shrivandu, will it come down? Will it come down? And he says, yes. Because in that yes, is the entire yogic force which is put here. It means that it is that yogic force now which starts operating in the entire cosmic mechanism, in the entire cosmic process. It starts functioning, it starts operating. So she is asking that question in a certain sense deliberately, and he is also answering in the same manner deliberately, that it has to happen. That's the power. Is that power, is not that power the high compeer of fate? Yes, it is. And then this is what Ashwapati is asking Narad. And Narad replies now to Ashwapati, one of the most beautiful answers, one of the most powerful passages also in Savitri. But Narad answered covering truth with truth. That is what we have seen last time, covering truth with truth. Now, that's a very beautiful phrase, as I said last time, and it is essentially the Vedic phrase, Rutena Rutam Apihitam, Rutena Rutam Apihitam. Truth is covered by truth. He is not disclosing anything, yet he is disclosing also, see. And the example which I had given you last time was, it is the Solomonic explanation, opening of justice, of saying indirectly it will happen like that. So it had that Solomonic reference also here, both Vedic and Solomonic, in the phrase truth with covering truth with truth. And then he sets himself now to answer Ashwapati in great, beautiful details. O Ashwapati, random seem the ways along whose banks your footsteps stray or run. In casual hours and momentary gods and momentary gods. Yet your least stumblings are forcing above. Least stumblings are forcing above. In casual hours and momentary gods. Now here, of course, what Savitri is going to make is not a casual hour. What Savitri is going to face is not going to be a casual hour, obviously. It is going to be the moment of the gods. Savitri is going to see. And if it is going to be the moment of the gods, then its result is already foreseen above. What is going to happen is assuring, yes, it is going to happen. Already foreseen above. What Savitri is going to meet, is going to face, that is already foreseen about. Because it is happening in the moment of the gods, in the divine moment, in the divine working, in the divine scheme of operation. And therefore, he says that to you, it looks to be an accident. To you, it looks to be a calamitous, bad fate, ill fate. But even here in this context, it is something which has already been foreseen above. In fact, foreseen above is important. When Ashwapati received the boon from the Divine Mother, the boon itself already says in it that death's tremendous hour shall arrive. in the death tremendous hour, a seed shall be sown. So, death tremendous hour is already seen above, foreseen above. We have seen that earlier. Let's see again that in death tremendous hour, 91.9. A seed shall be sown in death's tremendous hour. It's already seen above. The Divine Mother herself has said. In other words, if her boon has to be fulfilled, this tremendous hour must arrive. It is a part of the boon, the arrival of this tremendous hour. It is already foreseen. A branch of heaven transplant to human soil. Nature shall overleap her mortal step. Fate shall be changed by an unchanging will. Fate shall be changed by an unchanging will. This is the boon Ashwapati has received directly from the Divine Mother. And it is in that context Narada is perfectly justified in saying that your least stumblings are foreseen above. Everything is already happening here in that context. They had to roll out in that manner. Infallibly, the curves of life are drawn following the stream of time to the unknown. Time is unknown for us, but not for time. Time is moving in a given directed manner. They are led by a clue. The calm immortals keep. Calm immortals. Immortals here of course stands for gods. Through the unknown, calm immortals. You have already seen. And moments of the gods, the calm immortals. This moment of the gods and calm immortals, they are the same basically. You see.